U.S. President Trump today hosted the leaders of Ukraine and Israel in back-to-back meetings at the White House, meetings that, unlike previous ones, were noticeably closed to video cameras and reporters' questions. In a post on social media, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that he and Trump discussed a license for Ukraine to produce Patriot missiles, as well as the importance of restarting peace talks with Russia. Ukraine has intensified its drone attacks on Russian oil facilities in recent months. Now, Trump also hosted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for their first face-to-face talks since the beginning of the war with Iran. Relations between the two leaders have been strained by the conflict. Trump sidelined Netanyahu in the recent ceasefire talks. So it's been a revolving door of leaders at the White House. Our Washington Bureau Chief Ines Pohl, she joins me now from outside of the White House. Ines, let's talk about the meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky first. His relationship with Donald Trump, it seems friendlier, even I'll say stronger than ever.
Absolutely. I mean, you remember we talked about it when Volodymyr Zelensky more or less was kicked out of the White House not so long ago. And this attitude has really changed. It was a friendly meeting. What we hear, we also had sources inside the Oval Office because we as journalists were not allowed in there, which was, of course, a shame and a pity. But senior government workers for Zelensky told us that it was a very productive and a very practical meeting. They were really focused on the goals they wanted to achieve. And overall, it was very, very friendly indeed.
Wow. Yeah, as Zelensky's relationship with Trump has improved, Benjamin Netanyahu's has seemingly gone downhill. Remind us of why that is.
This was the first time that the two leaders met since the war in Iran has started. And this war, of course, is a huge problem for Donald Trump. It's hard for him to get out of it. And his fellow Americans don't approve the American involvement. The latest polls say that less than a third of all Americans want the United States being involved in this war. And more than 70% just think it's a waste of money that this country here is spending billions and billions of dollars. And as we all know, the midterms are just around the corner. They will take place in the beginning of November. And Donald Trump and, of course, his fellow Republicans start to fear that that will really hurt him. Netanyahu, on the other side, would rather increase the military involvement in Israel. So they are really coming from two very different sides regarding this very conflict.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine them finding common ground on this conflict. Both Zelensky and Netanyahu, they are in Washington today for the funeral of Senator Lindsey Graham, who was arguably the biggest supporter of both Israel and Ukraine in the U.S. Senate. Now, as they bid farewell to Graham, is there a member of Congress who even comes close to Graham's position, support of both of these countries, Ines?
Right, Brendan. I mean, Lindsey Graham, the late senator, was just coming back from Ukraine when he died some 2 weeks ago. He was really working hard of getting this package on sanctions against Russia through, and in his name, senators will meet with Volodymyr Zelensky tonight to discuss that piece of legislation in his name. And yes, of course, he was also very, very reliable supporter of Israel. When it comes to Israel, of course, there are more Republicans who are still close to Benjamin Netanyahu. It will be more difficult for Volodymyr Zelensky to find someone who is fighting so much for the support of Ukraine. But another aspect, and that's important to mention here, is that Lindsey Graham also was kind of a bridge figure between the president and Senate, because it's the relationship between Donald Trump and the senators was also, or is actually also souring. So he will be also very much missed in that position, like in building this bridge between the lawmakers and President Donald Trump.
Our Washington Bureau Chief Ines Pohl outside of the White House for us on this Tuesday. Ines, as always, thank you. Well, I'm joined now by Aaron David Miller. Aaron spent 25 years at the U.S. State Department advising on Middle East policy. He is now with Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Washington. Aaron, it's good to have you back on the program. Let me just ask you about what we saw today. Netanyahu and Ukrainian President Zelensky, they both met with Trump. And I know there's a lot of focus on Trump and Netanyahu meeting the first time since the war against Iran began. I mean, Netanyahu is in D.C. to attend the funeral of Senator Lindsey Graham, who was a staunch supporter of Israel. Would this meeting be taking place had the U.S. Senator not passed away?
I don't think so. I think the president annoyed the White House earlier over the last 6-7 weeks, and certainly since the senator passed, wanting a meeting. I think no decision was made until relatively recently to have him here. So the answer is no. There was no need for this meeting. From Trump's point of view, there clearly is a need for Netanyahu's, because within 90 days, he faces the most important political election of his life, which could invariably affect his freedom. He's on trial for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in a Jerusalem district court, 5 years in running. If he loses power, there's a real possibility that he could be convicted. One of his predecessors, Adol Omer, went to prison for 17 months for one of the charges that Netanyahu is accused of. Or alternatively, he'll be forced to cut a plea deal, admit guilt, and that would end his political career. So the stakes are very high. He needs Trump's endorsement. And I think he believes this is the 8th visit by this Israeli prime minister to the White House. It's extraordinary. It goes well beyond, I don't know, who the second closest world leader to see Trump in Washington is. But it demonstrates, and Netanyahu has a stake in demonstrating the centrality of his role in the U.S.-Israeli relationship.
My colleagues were struck today by how the Israeli media reported on this meeting, saying that the meeting was a very positive one, saying that you could clearly see the chemistry between the two leaders. I mean, what does this tell you about the need to craft a positive narrative for the Israelis?
I mean, I think there was no need for a bad meeting. The prime minister would have to have been galactically stupid, foolish, to press or lecture Donald Trump, or to press him in any significant or sustained way about the merits of resuming this war. Trump is headed for the exits, or at least he's looking for the exits. And they have very different goals there. But the senior partner in this relationship is Donald Trump. And Benjamin Netanyahu cannot afford to cross him. You see what's happening in Lebanon, where the president has set down sort of rules of the road. The Israelis have not struck Beirut or the southern suburbs. And even in Gaza, where the Israeli Security Cabinet yesterday, day before yesterday, agreed to allow the International Stabilization Force to deploy in what they're calling New Rafah. It's a symbolic deployment. I'm not sure it's serious, but it was an effort to pave the way for a good meeting. Trump is not J.D. Vance when it comes to Israel. He's much, much less critical, although, as we know, he has said things to and about an Israeli prime minister that no American president worked for Jimmy Carter to Bush 43, and you could throw in Obama and Biden. No American president has ever been this forthright or critical of an Israeli prime minister publicly.
I'm just wondering where they're going to find common ground here, because as you said, President Trump, he wants an exit ramp. He wants this war with Iran to be history. Netanyahu and his government, his cabinet, they want this war or some version of it to continue. I mean, there is no middle ground here, is there?
Well, no, there is no middle ground, because the president has made it unmistakably clear that unless Iran attacks Israel directly, Israel is not going to get involved in this war. Donald Trump has decreed it. And unless the Iranians are overplaying their hand by striking the Israelis unilaterally, Benjamin Netanyahu had a very important impact in how this war started. He's not going to have an impact in how it ends. That's another rule of the road that Trump has made unmistakably clear. And Netanyahu, again, I'll say it with the one caveat. Should the Iranians strike Israel directly, Netanyahu is going to respond. But if they don't, Donald Trump says, you stay out, and Netanyahu says, okay, or not okay, but I will.
Today, more than 500 former IDF generals, intelligence officers, police officers, and Israeli diplomats published an open letter for President Trump saying that Trump is the only person who can save Israel from the settler terror that the current Israeli government is allowing to happen. Will this get President Trump's attention?
I mean, it could have been one of the issues that they talked about, but in Trump 1.0 and now halfway through Trump 2.0, this administration has shown this not the slightest indication when it comes to Israeli settlement activities, settler violence and terror, land confiscation, closures, creating a new administrative relationship which links the West Bank to Israel proper, show no indication whatsoever that is prepared to impose a single cost or consequence on the Netanyahu government for these activities. So unless there is some change of heart, maybe reflected in the meeting, it seems to me that the administration, even if they come out against it, it'll be largely performative.
Let me ask you before we run out of time. As we said earlier, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, he was also at the White House today. He and Netanyahu, they've both had their up and downs with President Trump, including open meetings with live TV cameras from the Oval Office. But not today. Today, surprisingly, both of these meetings took place with no reporters, no cameras. What message do those closed doors send?
You don't do a presser for three reasons. Number one, there are fundamental problems which they don't want displayed publicly. Number two, there's nothing really of consequence to announce. And number three, a presser only leads to awkward questions and perhaps awkward responses. I don't know whether this is true or not in the sense that the president is now giving the eulogy at the National Cathedral. They didn't do pressers also on two issues that Lindsey Graham was very high on, supporting Ukraine, supporting Israel. I'm not sure that there may have been a proprietary issue here, a propriety issue here, not proprietary, propriety issue that they didn't want to, today, hours before the president speaks at this solemn ceremony, they didn't want to mix this up with awkward moments, uncomfortable pauses, or perhaps a gaffe or two that one or the other man or one of the three would come to regret.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maintaining decorum, that's something we don't report on very often, at least not
and I
these
also
days.
I don't associate that with the Trump administration.
Aaron David Miller, as always, Aaron, good to have you on the program. We appreciate your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.